I never doubted I was part of the family. Not once. I was adopted as a baby, but my parents made sure I felt loved. Bedtime stories, scraped knees gently kissed, birthdays filled with laughter and pink frosted cakes. They always said I was chosen, special even. I believed them. I believed them right up until the day we gathered in that cold, echoing office for the reading of Grandpa's will. That's when everything I thought I knew about love and family shattered. I expected tears, grief, maybe a few old stories and a toast in his honor, but instead I got silence, and a single page that cut deeper than any blade ever could. Everything, and I mean everything, was left to Nathan. The properties, the family business, even the heirlooms Grandma had promised me when I was 13. I sat there frozen, trying to smile through the burn in my throat. My name wasn't even mentioned once. Nathan didn't look at me when he spoke. He didn't need to. "You were adopted," he said flatly, like that explained everything. "This legacy runs through our blood." I remember blinking, thinking surely someone would say something, would correct him, would defend me. But no one did. And in that moment, I realized I had no birthright, they claimed, but they'd soon learn I had something sharper: reason, proof, and a plan. The car ride home felt endless. I kept staring out the window, gripping the edge of my coat like it might anchor me to something real. My parents were quiet, too quiet. No apologies, no outrage, just a hollow kind of discomfort. I finally asked, "Did you know?" My mother flinched but said nothing. My father cleared his throat, eyes locked on the road. "It's complicated," he muttered. That was all I got. That was all I was worth. I tried to replay every memory, hunting for signs I had missed, moments where I was treated differently, loved just a little less. But nothing stood out. Not until now. Suddenly, their smiles looked performative, their praise too measured. Had it all been conditional? Was blood the line they never told me existed? It didn't make sense. They raised me, held me when I was sick, laughed at my dumb jokes. How could they sit there and let Nathan erase me? But maybe this wasn't just about family. Maybe it was about power. Nathan had always played the role of the golden son, charming, ambitious, calculated. I used to admire that. Now I saw it for what it was: a mask. He didn't just want the inheritance. He wanted control, and cutting me out was his first move. He thought I'd vanish quietly, accept my place as the outsider. But I was done grieving. I was done asking why. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with an old mug of tea, letting it go cold in my hands while I replayed every word from that office. The silence from my parents echoed louder than Nathan's cruelty. But something shifted in me. The sadness didn't fade, but it twisted into resolve. If they could rewrite my worth with ink and signatures, then I'd rewrite the narrative myself. On my terms. By morning, I was at my desk, digging. I started with the obvious: past wills, company records, any legal breadcrumbs that might tell a different story. If Nathan was bold enough to erase me publicly, what had he been doing in the shadows? I wasn't looking for revenge. Not yet. I was looking for truth. And truth has a way of slipping through even the tightest fingers when you know where to look. Everyone else was ready to move on, to mourn Grandpa and carry on with their neat little version of family. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot, because if they wanted to draw a line in blood, they needed to remember something. I may not have their last name by birth, but I knew how to fight like hell for the one I was given. And the first place to start? Uncovering the family I thought I had. Grief has many faces, and mine looked like betrayal wrapped in silence. I walked into the kitchen the next morning, half expecting my mom to reach for my hand, to say it had all been a mistake. Instead, she asked if I wanted eggs, like nothing had happened, like her daughter hadn't just been erased from her own family tree. That kind of casual cruelty? It's the kind that lingers. It doesn't scream, it seeps. Later that day, I confronted them. I needed to understand, not just what happened, but how they could let it happen. My father said, "That's just how it's always been." And that was the moment I realized I had spent my whole life trying to belong to something that only saw me as borrowed. I wasn't angry yet, just gutted. Like the foundation of my world had quietly rotted, and I was the last to notice. Nathan, of course, was smug. He called it business, not personal. Said I should be grateful for the years I had in the family home, like I was a guest who had overstayed her welcome. He smiled when he said it, not cruel, just matter of fact. That smile told me everything I needed to know. He thought he'd won, that I would vanish, too ashamed or too broken to push back. But he underestimated me. I stopped asking why. There's a certain freedom in giving up on explanations that only hurt more with each retelling. If they couldn't see me as family without a bloodline, then maybe their love had always come with conditions. That realization, it stung more than Nathan's words. It meant every hug, every holiday, every "I'm proud of you" might have been performative. I wasn't grieving a grandfather anymore. I was grieving a lie. So I redirected that grief. It's amazing what you can find when you stop trying to win people over and start paying attention to what they're hiding. I started reading legal blogs, inheritance laws, trust fund loopholes. At night, I built a spreadsheet that began to take shape like a weapon. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for yet, but I knew this. If Nathan wanted to treat this like business, then he'd meet the version of me that knew how to make things very uncomfortable. I still remember the moment I found the company registry, the first crack in the wall. Their real estate holdings weren't just some family nest egg. They were an empire, tied up in trusts and board seats and shares. And if I had no place in their hearts, maybe I could carve one out in their boardroom. This wasn't about revenge. It was about recognition. If they wouldn't call me family, I'd become their reckoning. I started collecting names, lawyers, former employees, anyone tied to the company's past. I wasn't loud about it. I was methodical. I played the role they expected, the quiet, hurt girl licking her wounds. But behind that silence, I was stitching together a map. Every signature, every transaction, every subtle power play Nathan made. I studied them like scripture. And what I found, it started to shift the power. My days became a balancing act, smiling politely at family dinners while uncovering the ways they'd excluded me behind closed doors. It was lonely work, but it was also clarifying. I no longer needed their approval. I didn't crave a seat at their table. I was building my own. Every night, I'd sit by the window with my laptop open, watching the cursor blink while I rewrote my place in the story, line by line, fact by fact. And the deeper I went, the more I realized this wasn't just about inheritance or legacy, it was about what's right. About every adopted child who's ever been told they're lucky just to be included. I wasn't lucky. I was loyal. And I was ready to prove that being chosen is sometimes more powerful than being born into anything. The next step? Finding the paper trail they thought they'd buried for good. It started with an old file in a mislabeled folder, the kind of thing most people would have missed. But I wasn't most people anymore. The document listed the original investors for the company, and right there, in clean typed font, was my mother's trust. Not my grandfather's, my mother. Her inheritance had seeded the foundation of the business Nathan now claimed as his birthright. So if this empire was built on blood, it wasn't just his. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not pain, exactly, but something close to power. My mother had given her fortune to that company, and they still acted like I had no claim to it. That discovery wasn't just a crack in their story. It was a fracture, a wedge I could drive open. If the legacy was built with her money, then their argument about blood was already on shaky ground, and I was about to make it collapse. Then I found the will. Not the one that was read in that cold, sterile office, a different one. A version marked draft, unsigned, with my name on it, co-heir, equal partner. There it was in the margins and the legalese, proof that I was never meant to be cut out. The signature line was blank, and the date was just 3 weeks before my grandfather died. That's when my hands started shaking. Not from shock, but from clarity. I cross-referenced the dates. 3 weeks before Grandpa's death. That's when Nathan took over managing his medical care and legal affairs. Suddenly, Documents were rerouted through Nathan's office. Phone calls went unanswered. And then, silence. It was all starting to make sense. He didn't just benefit from the will. He orchestrated it. Quietly, cleanly, like a man who knew how to erase a name without ever lifting a pen. But the more I dug, the dirtier it got. I found bank transfers that didn't match company expenses. Shell companies tied to Nathan's personal accounts, renovations billed twice, invoices with redacted vendors. It wasn't just greed, it was theft, systemic and deliberate. And he thought no one would notice. After all, I was just the adopted girl with no claim to the throne. But I had a new weapon now, the truth. And I was documenting every inch of it. I printed copies, backed up files, even secured a meeting with an estate attorney, one of Grandpa's old friends. He looked at the documents and sighed like someone who'd seen too many families destroy themselves over money. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" he asked gently. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the will with my name on it, unsigned but alive. "I'm not going through with anything," I finally said. "I'm finishing what he started. There's something sobering about holding a truth no one else knows yet. It's like carrying a lit match through a room soaked in gasoline. You feel its weight, its heat, the responsibility of timing. I wasn't just planning anymore. I was preparing. Not for revenge, for justice, for acknowledgement, for the kind of reckoning that forces people to look you in the eyes and realize they never really saw you at all. I kept going, quietly, strategically. I pulled annual reports, scanned expense sheets, highlighted board meeting minutes that contradicted Nathan's official statements. It was tedious, but every highlight felt like a heartbeat, steady, deliberate. And then I found what would tip the scale completely. A payment made out to a private investigator, dated days before the will was finalized. Why would Nathan need a PI? And more importantly, what had he found? By the time I closed my laptop, the pieces were all there. The funding from my mother's trust, the draft will naming me, the evidence of Nathan's manipulation. They had erased me from the inheritance. But I had uncovered everything they tried to bury. And the best part? They still thought I was in the dark. Let them stay comfortable. Let them smile at dinners and speak in platitudes. Because soon, I'd show them what buried truths can become when they're finally brought to light. The lobby was marble and silence. I could hear my heels echo as I walked toward the boardroom, the same one where Nathan had given his first public address as CEO. Back then, I sat in the back, small and smiling, clapping like a proud sister. This time, I carried a leather folder under my arm, full of the kind of documents that turned applause into outrage. I wasn't here for show. I was here to take back what was mine. I paused at the glass doors. Inside, men in tailored suits were sipping coffee, checking their watches, pretending the world couldn't shift beneath their feet. Nathan stood at the head of the table, mid-sentence, confident, charming, in complete control. For now. I opened the door without knocking. The room went still, and for the first time, I saw something flicker across Nathan's face. Not fear. Not yet. But recognition. Like he finally realized I wasn't bluffing. I didn't waste time. I passed out copies of the trust documents, the draft will, and the embezzlement evidence. I spoke clearly. No theatrics. "This board deserves transparency," I said, locking eyes with each person. "And this company deserves leadership that isn't siphoning it dry." Nathan tried to laugh, called it a misunderstanding. But when I showed them the proof, bank statements, forged authorizations, the laughter stopped. Completely. One of the board members, a woman named Cecilia, looked up from the papers and asked the question I'd been waiting for. "And what exactly are you asking us to do?" I didn't flinch. "Vote," I said. "Vote to remove Nathan as CEO. Vote to reinstate my rightful place as co-heir, based on documented evidence and the original intent of our founder, my grandfather." My voice didn't shake. I didn't ask. I declared. And that, more than anything, seemed to shift the air in the room. Nathan tried to regain control. He played the victim, said I was twisting facts, using grief as a weapon. He talked about loyalty, about family, as if he hadn't spent the last month pretending I didn't exist. But the documents spoke louder than he did. They always do. And when Cecilia leaned forward and asked, "Is any of this untrue?" Nathan went quiet, not because he didn't have an answer, but because every answer would damn him. The vote wasn't unanimous. Not at first. There were whispers, sideways glances, the kind of discomfort that comes from watching a carefully maintained illusion fall apart. But it happened. One by one, hands raised, mine included. And when it was over, Nathan stood there, stunned, stripped of his title, his smugness slipping away like smoke. He still didn't speak. Maybe he was waiting for someone to save him, but no one did. Not this time. As the room emptied, I stayed seated, watching Nathan gather his things with a kind of mechanical calm. No tantrum, no final jab, just silence, the kind that says he knew this day was always possible. I didn't feel triumph. Not exactly. It wasn't a victory parade, it was a reckoning, and reckonings are heavy, but I carried it. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about restoring what had been stolen, not in dollars, but in dignity. Cecilia came over, touched my arm, and whispered, "That was brave." I nodded, but inside I was somewhere else, remembering all the nights I sat alone with files, wondering if any of it would matter. It did. The truth, the proof, the persistence. It all led here. I wasn't family by their definition. I wasn't shaped by the same blood. But I had something they never counted on. Fire. And in that boardroom, I burned down their version of the story. I walked out differently than I walked in. Not just with a new title or a seat at the table, but with my identity intact, reclaimed, respected. They couldn't take that from me anymore. As I stepped into the hallway, the weight didn't lift, but it shifted. I was in charge now, and the legacy they tried to keep behind closed doors, I was about to open it wide, for everyone, and it started with a decision I never thought I'd make. The boardroom battle was over, but the headlines were just beginning. Word spread quickly. The disgraced CEO, the adopted sister who exposed it all, the family legacy rewritten in full public view. Reporters called it scandal. I called it justice. Nathan retreated from view, shielding himself behind lawyers and half-hearted statements, but I didn't chase him. I didn't need to. His silence said more than any press release ever could. Still, something in me resisted the easy ending. I didn't want to watch him rot. I wanted him to look me in the eye and say the words he never had the decency to say. So I gave him an offer. No criminal charges, no drawn-out court battles. If he did one thing, a public acknowledgement, not just of the fraud, but of the truth he'd spent years trying to erase, that I was his sister, that I belonged. He blinked when I said it, like the idea of admitting that out loud was more painful than prison, but he agreed. Maybe out of pride, maybe out of fear, maybe deep down, he knew it was the only way to salvage what little name he had left. The statement came out days later, signed, broadcast, and impossible to retract. And for the first time, I saw my name printed alongside the family's, not as a footnote, as an equal. After it aired, I sat alone in the office that used to be his. The leather still smelled like him. The framed photos had already been taken down. I didn't cry. I thought I would. That some wave of relief or vindication would finally crash over me. But what I felt was quieter, fuller. Like the ache had space to breathe. Like maybe for the first time in a long while, I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I had already done that, but I didn't stop there. Legacy means nothing if it ends with a signature and a press release. So I took the name they'd tried to keep from me and gave it new meaning. I founded a scholarship under my grandfather's name, not for boardroom heirs or trust fund kids, but for children like me. Adopted, overlooked, told they didn't belong. I watched the first acceptance letters go out, and I felt something shift, not in them, in me. People called it poetic. I didn't argue, but it wasn't about poetry. It was about power, about rewriting the story not with revenge, but with purpose. I didn't need Nathan's approval anymore. I didn't even need his apology. Because I had done the impossible, turned a rejection into a mission, a legacy not built on blood, but on intention. And that, to me, meant more than any will ever could. Sometimes I still hear his voice, not the cruel one from the will reading, but the boy who once helped me with math homework, who shared ice cream on the porch in late summer. That version of him feels like a ghost now, but I don't hate him. I don't need to. He showed me what lines people are willing to draw to protect their comfort, and in doing so, he taught me how to redraw them, on my own terms. I walk the halls of our headquarters now with a different kind of presence, not loud, not flashy, just unshakable. The staff looks at me with respect, not curiosity. My name is on every document they once tried to hide from me. But more than that, it's on the lips of people who once whispered I didn't belong. Funny how truth has a way of rising, even when buried deep, especially when buried deep. They thought I was an outsider, a shadow, a technicality, but I became the light that exposed everything. I became the voice they couldn't silence. I became the legacy. Not the one written in blood, but the one forged in fire. And now, when people speak of this family, of this empire, they'll remember the girl they tried to cut out, because she's the one who made sure it could never be erased again.